Everyone, it's your boy Matt here. The purpose of this video today is to really highlight the extent of the corporate abuse which has taken place in my case. So I'll take a few steps back. When I was 19 years old, I joined the Navy. This was an opportunity for me to get away from my family, try and make something for myself. I went through the Ad for Entry program, went to the Naval College, and I was bastardized at the Naval College. Put plainly, I just wasn't developmentally at the right stage to begin taking on a leadership role. And at the same time, the culture I came from was a very pacifist culture. I came from a very religious community, and the idea of giving military orders, giving acting with authority, and that hierarchical system was not something which resonated with my people. I had a disabled father. I had a very strange childhood. There's a lot of things which happen when you are exposed to where your father is very autistic, and you come from a family which believes that the world is 3,000 years old, yet your dad's a science teacher. You have these people who are theologians in your family or want to be theologians who create up all this lore describing why all this crazy shit is real. And getting to the Navy was my opportunity to break free from that. What I found in the Navy was that my house, what my close friend was falsely accused of rape. I was isolated from my division because they had this rule that once you fail a module of training, you're removed from the course, and you're not allowed to interact with a single person on that course. So what ended up happening is that every interaction I had with anyone was someone screaming or yelling at me. And this happened for around 6 months. 6 months of a 1 year period, I was being abused like this. That had lifelong implications, and that changed the way I grew as a person. And it was a horrific experience of bastardization. Now, that altered the developmental trajectory of my life. On the one hand, I had access to these amazing mentors and some brilliant people who tried to soften the blow of that and tried to build capacity in me, and they were successful. I am now able to do some incredible things. The other side of things is that I lost a significant period of my life just then and then afterwards due to the abuse which occurred there. Skip forward a few years, I come to Canberra. I train I find out that I'm part of a cult. I'm part of a gang culture, really, which is associated with military. The Australian Signals community, we were engaged in propaganda in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu community. There was an attempt to try and get these two things aligned together. The idea was that by having this relationship with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's good because it's an activity which you can get community around. It's excellent because it brings soldiers together, and the idea was that we would get these soldiers together that have a community activity to do. It's an extra activity they can do which increases military capability. It's a form of outreach so we can get recruitment from it. We built relationships with big names in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu community so that we'd be able to assist with propaganda. There was instances where we had high level and important members of the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu community go to places like Ukraine. We sponsored big international events. There was a lot done with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Signals, and Australian propaganda. Michael was associated with this, but it was also just something which was done through military. Sometimes they tack on to the NFL, which is the American Football League. I think that's the acronym for it, National Football League. But there's so many different kinds of football, so I think there's one or two different NFLs. Like, the army will sponsor the game. They'll have the Star Spangled Banner. They'll have their fucking helicopters come in. The same thing was being done with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I got to see that and be part of that. I was being groomed as talent in that, as an act. So because I was a junior psychologist, The idea is that in this community, I would be someone who would be like, the guy who would promote the sport, promote psychology in the sport and be associated with it. I had these close ties to military. I was being groomed as a talent. I know this because other people around me were being groomed as talents as well. It was there's a movie called, not movie, TV series called, what was it? Silicon Valley. And there's this guy who has an incubator, and he has the idea is that he has these guys, and when they come up with a project, he gets a cut of it. Michael was trying to do that through his gym. He was trying to build a series of people such as myself with talent, and these people would then promote his agenda and his gym. In reality, it was actually a form of slavery. These people have a gang mentality, and it's not much more complicated than that. And after they invested in me, they were wanting to make sure that they came up with me. And I was very happy for that to have happened, except they treated me like absolute shit. And it's my business who I associate with, and I do not tolerate the level of abuse that they provided to me, and I do not tolerate slavery. And that's one instance of slavery I've had to deal with. No, the second time. First in military, then in that. And thirdly, there was Donald Macaskill, who was he was an Indigenous elder, and the way it works in Indigenous cultures is that your elders, they are very traditional and hierarchical, and often someone claiming themselves to be an elder just means that they can fuck you over, and because it's within their culture, there's some legitimacy to it. So he was trying to exploit me as well. I realized he was a con man. I tried to leave his organization. There wasn't any work for me to do, and then because he's just an absolute baby pussy piece of shit, he had a meltdown when I wasn't doing any work after no work had been provided, and there was no work for me to do. And then he was like, "Hey, why aren't you doing anything?" It's like, there's no work for me to do. I'm leaving your organization because I don't think you're any good at your job, and we're done. And then he threw a massive tantrum, and at the moment he owes me at least $2,000 from the last weeks of work where there wasn't anything for me to do. But he then got angry at that, sent out a whole lot of emails because he's a pathetic businessman, tried to integrate himself in my communities. And a man called Stephen Cole, who had previously bastardized me at the Naval College, he didn't rape me, but he may as well have. He was interconnected with Donald Macaskill, because that's the thing. People with this patriarchal, hierarchical attitude see people as younger than them as having less worth than them, right? And they can do things to you and with you to benefit them without providing anything to you, because that's the way that they see the pecking order. So I've had these multiple instances where my work and value gets stolen from me. And then finally, there was the instance at Get Scared Kids. Now, what happened is that Amanda Mazzoni and I did not get along. The reason we didn't get along is because, put plainly, I'm a very grounded, results-oriented person. I want good things to happen for my community and for my participants, and I have the skills to make that happen. Amanda Mazzoni came into being during a Tony Robbins convention and a satanic ritual on stage. She wasn't born. She's this strange woman who believes, that the wealth you have justifies how important and special you are. She needs to be the special little center of the universe. I hope from this experience she's changed, because she's a very intelligent woman and she's very passionate about developmental psychology. And I've said before that in a different set of circumstances, her and I may be friends. To an extent we are. But she did something truly heinous, truly terrible. And I think it was more to do with a man called Fred Sashini. I had a middle manager called Sarah Samuel who was just not cut out for the job. And what happened is that I had this horrific experience where I was understanding that I was dealing with clients with borderline personality disorder. I was the only male psychologist in my field. I was dealing with these very vulnerable people, and I knew that it was going to be just a matter of time before I had a false rape allegation. And I knew from watching what happened to my friend at the Naval College what was going to happen. And I knew how these people thought, and I knew that I was not in my boss's good books because my orientation to my work was so different from hers. Like, if a client does not need treatment, I don't treat them. I don't overservice. I don't see the money coming through as the KPI which matters. I see the outcome for the participant. And the level of responsibility and what I was working with was just so much higher than the other people in the organization. And I was getting results because the previous psych, which she believed was an amazing psych, but I found out from working through the caseload, actually wasn't, and no measurable therapeutic progress had happened with any of my participants. And I came along and then things started changing. I have a small amount of talent, but more than that, I'm able to coordinate networks because I did have that military training when I was a kid, that I can take charge of situations. So this happened, and what existed around that was I realized there was going to be a child safety issue, and because she didn't like me, she portrayed me as a pedophile. She did a horrific thing, the worst thing you could possibly do, to silence a person who had issues with how the business was being run, the obvious and games which were being played in the NDIS and I was being instructed to participate in. And every time there was like a small thing, I used AI once to create a fucking worksheet. That's fine. That is not an issue. But she will latch on to anything to make herself feel special and make her actions feel justified, right? She has been terrible. She did a horrific thing. And the surveillance and the following on marginalization which occurred because of her behavior was heinous. And also what happened, let's go back to the story of how Taco came to be. The Australian Signals Directorate made me pornography. This was done as a bit of a international thing it was a game that we were playing together. They've got too much time on their hands, honestly. I jerked off during my lunch break, which I'm entitled to do. I'm at home, I can do whatever the fuck I want. 3, they had spyware on my computer. I was not inside a virtual desktop environment. I was inside just my normal computer, normal screens, but they had spyware installed on my computer through a program called Windows Virtual Desktop. And they saw me jerking off. They saw my porn pages. They doxed it. They intentionally humiliated me, and they intentionally marginalized me. Okay? So this has been a case of significant abuse, truly heinous behavior by people in a corporate setting who believed that they owned me and had what they did is a criminal offence. Let me make that very clear. What happened was a criminal offence. They spied on an employee. They had spyware on that person's personal computer, and they looked through his personal information. Okay? So these are facts of the case of what's happened, which I need to communicate as clearly as possible. Because if there's opportunity for cooperation, like I make things happen, that means cooperating. But let's be clear, these were heinous acts. I would prefer there to be criminal charges, and I'd prefer Amanda Mazzoni, Fred Cicchini, Sarah Samuel, anyone who's been involved in this to face the appropriate scrutiny and judgment really for what's happened. I don't care if you're my friend or not. Like, you cannot treat a person like this. And the following on what's happened to me, where I've been marginalized by the employer unions, intentionally had law enforcement scrutinize my behavior, and what has been done to me has been heinous, and there should be consequences for that behavior to the management at Humanity Health Group. There should also be actions taken to remove signals and the behavior by these terrible people associated with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and propaganda. I think they should also take criminal charges, because what they've done is that they've demonstrated a gang mentality. They have demonstrated sort of the same, the behavior that they're doing now is the same behavior that they would give to their ex-girlfriend or ex-friends. It's been very silly behavior. You can't control and dominate a person like this. And when they behave like this, there needs to be a criminal charge and they need to face the consequences of that behavior. Now, that's the end of my statement today. This is a very important statement and I hope it's taken seriously and I'd like actions to be taken. Have a lovely day, everyone.